that what that says? Not Starbucks. Not until they sponsor, right?
Fuck that.
A Starbucks sponsor?
Yeah, just do that shit, dude.
Unlimited money, bro.
Bro, I would take that one.
What sponsor from Starbucks?
Absolutely.
Because you just want PSLs for life, bro.
Yes.
You probably need to have like a tranny on the show or something, though, you know?
You have to.
Yeah, that's if you want that money, you got to.
We-
Are you transitioning?
You have to, if I identify.
Let me grow
That's
this.
all you gotta do.
Let me grow this out like 2-3 more inches.
It's getting pretty wavy. I'm growing my hair out, that's why I'm hiding it with a hat now.
You know what's great? I've had probably a dozen fucking deja vus in the past 2 weeks. And I just had another one now.
Deja vu?
Yeah.
Maybe you're the next human evolution.
Dude, we were literally talking about that shit last night.
That you're the evolution?
Revolution.
You're the revolution?
Literally, we talked about that
revolution,
shit.
man. That's,
Literally talked about that last night. Like, that's the type of
I
conversation.
watched another video from some lawyer on YouTube talking about the human right to revolution. It's not just your right to bear arms. There's an inherent right to revolt.
against tyranny, for sure. I mean, every veteran takes that oath, right? I mean, that's why we got the 3%ers. But, so, yeah. I think we're on the brink of a revolution here soon.
That's that line it's in the Declaration of Independence too, though.
Right.
And I don't know the exact quote itself, but
Gonna butcher it. Well,
becomes the duty of the individuals to overthrow their tyrannical government. I'll
Yeah.
pull up that text right now.
What was that conversation? You said it was like a video or like
It was a YouTube video.
What was he saying?
He's
This
just
would be a good conversation.
Well, he's just talking about that, like that is a right, like that's how many people, if you ask them like, do you have a right to have a revolution? Fox News or CNN, either one's gonna be calling you the political extremist.
Yeah,
but
you're a terrorist.
It's an inherent right. And then you got things like the Sedition Act. Well, somebody who doesn't support whatever war you're going in, handing out pamphlets saying don't support the war. Is that free speech? No, the government says that's sedition.
Yeah, I think, especially in the past few years, there's been a lot of that shit. The mass suppression of information, disinformation, and just, I mean, look at all the shit that happened with, all the different social media platforms, like 4 years ago? Or whatever, just over time where they just start taking shit down just
Cancel
because
culture, yeah.
the cancel, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Well, I mean, you got to be able to argue both sides of it in order to understand it, right? Like,
Right.
so yeah, you would want child traffickers not putting advertisements up on social media in a clandestine way, right? That's something we could all agree should be canceled out of the culture or something. But the problem is once you start trying to mandate or legislate what we consider morality, you've got both sides of the coin that you got to be able to argue. So as soon as they say we're going to take down this content, now we have the right to take down any content in which we deem to be immoral. And unfortunately, we're not having these type of conversations in society where we're still arguing what morality means. We've kind of just handed it over to the government to say, you tell us how to live our lives. And it's not unlike the same way pious religious people give all their rights to make decisions for their lives over to the church, and they say, listen, you and this deity need to tell us how to live our lives instead of doing real deep introspection and having conversations amongst peers to figure it out. Whether or not we truly agree with what's being laid out before us as rules.
Here we go. So just to start, right, our first line of the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, right there itself, you know, that's dissolving your bond to the government. That's a revolution right there.
That's a perfect example.
Colonies dissolved our connections with the British monarchy. But then further in, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And then our government gets their power from the people, not any other way around. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new governments. Right there, Declaration of Independence. Anybody who would say that you're extreme, that's one of our founding documents.
Well, it's a perfect example, especially with everything that's going on, is all the division. Because what they don't want is they don't want people banding together. Because strength in numbers.
Yeah, that's where our
It's
power comes from.
It's the whole purpose of the fuckery that's going on lately, and just the whole division amongst our people.
Yeah, the irony is you got lies from both sides of the aisle.
Right.
And it really is. I mean, you had a conversation about manipulation, and that's really all you see in politics anymore, man. There's no persuasion. There's no debate necessarily. It really is just one manipulation tactic after the other. And you know, you can't even trust what comes out of a politician's mouth. We're back on track now.
You know, the trash can was entertaining. Dang, it could have got that's the one time I'll make that shot.
It would have caught it too.
It would have caught it.
Damn it. All right, but yeah, 100%, and we kind of talked about that last night too, and that's kind of where I was when I showed you that snippet of if people on all sides, all fucking sides, doesn't matter what your beliefs are, your current situation, doesn't matter. If people would have more of an open mind and just be truthful or more authentic of who they are, but have an open mind and be able to have a realistic conversation with someone. Because, and you're absolutely right with what we talked about earlier, is we also have to have that argument, right? But a healthy argument to be able to get somewhere.
Well, in order to have a good debate, first you need good information, good sources, and you know that's part of the issue. Most people aren't well educated enough. They don't want to become well educated enough on the topics to be able to create their own ideas or solutions. So they take whatever's given to them on a little silver platter, and it's ironic because a lot of the times you'll see these extremes on both sides, and when you really start digging into the nitty gritty. The actual text within, say, a new piece of legislation, once you start figuring out all the details, most people are like, well, I agree with the headline, but I don't necessarily agree with how the government's going to roll this out, whether that be tax cuts or abortion or whatever the fuck. And so it makes it even more difficult for society to have these necessary conversations because there's so much misinformation being fed in these false narratives, which again comes back to pure manipulation tactics. We're going to give you big headlines, we're going to offset it with smaller subtext, but we're not going to give you the entire context, because once you get all the context, you're going to realize that we're all feeding one monstrous beast, and that is the billionaire class of the world, you know? And it really doesn't matter which side you want to argue at this point, it feeds one billionaire or another billionaire. And so I think at this point, man, like we're on the precipice of what I think is going to be like the social revolution of our millennia. You know, I mean, you see it in France, you see it in Brazil, you see it in Colombia. People are rising up all over the country. And once Americans decide to step up, once Americans decide to revolt against what we would, I guess, probably call like this new world order, that's going to be the face of the worldwide revolution. You know,
100%.
And as long as we're willing to bend over and take it, you know, the rest of the world's not gonna stand up and fight. So it takes Americans I mean, it's our responsibility at the end of the day.
Well, America's always been I almost said Big Brother, but technically
Nah, it's
that's
starting
still
like the
true.
1950s.
That's still true, but everybody worldwide really has looked up to the U.S. And
Yeah. Well, and our government should be set up for that, right? I mean, if you go back to the founding documents, the foundation of this new democracy was predicated on the fact that the people could drive the end results.
peek into that, get you on there. Wanted to. You gotta get in there
That's
more,
what we, bro.
and then they'll follow you over there.
All right, I'm here. That's no, it said fuck you.
Oh, it's like I see that bald head.
It's a-
They're like, that's a spotlight dude right there. Yeah, no, it's. I definitely agree with that because with the whole. Once Americans and once people here start really stepping up, not only stepping up but taking responsibility for, how do I word this? Responsibilities of who we are and what our foundation as Americans are. Because I think
Not only that, responsibility for themselves.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is
Like self-accountability.
right.
Because
Because I think majority of the people, we all want the same thing in life. We want to live, free. We want to prosper. We want to, just live our lives, right? So I think a lot of people, even on opposite sides, can relate to that overall. But everybody is so clicked up or have wrong information, or they, like you said, refuse to even learn about.
yeah, willful ignorance.
Right. So that's the whole like responsibility type for self,
Yeah.
individual people.
And so,
Well, that's kind of the catch-22 of like the Democratic Party's proposition, right? Is like you don't have to think for yourself because we have all these educated, well-paid, highly successful social elites that will think for you. So we'll make all these very, very tough decisions for you, and all you have to do is just pay an excessive amount of taxes and go home and live your ignorant life. And a lot of people are drawn to that because it's the path of least resistance. It's the path of least responsibility.
exactly. And so they'll happily be on board with, I'm gonna let the government take care of this. I'll let them regulate it. I'll let them tell us how to do it. I want them to take care of this for me. I want the government to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much with, your self accountability. This is my job to take care of myself. I need to educate myself. I need to go to school, learn, acquire a skill so that I can get a decent paying job. They just want the government to take care of it, the government to raise their minimum wage, the government to say, we need universal health care. You shouldn't need that. That's not freedom. If the government is the one that handles everything, the government's also able to take away everything. And you can look at Canada. You got truck drivers protesting. They're just parked on the side of a roadway. They're not even necessarily doing anything, and the government just freezes their bank accounts.
Yeah, I remember that. That was crazy shit.
I'm surprised that didn't spark any sort of revolution.
I mean,
Well, the problem with revolution is that it requires warfare.
yeah.
And I think this is why you see what the Americans would call the right. We and I identify as a very conservative American in most aspects. We're not quick to jump to bear arms because we understand it's a lose-lose situation at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
A civil war, nobody really wins.
Yeah.
Where I think the left is quick to incite riots and incite violence, especially when they don't get their way. And that's not just my opinion, that's a fact. I mean, look it up, Baltimore, Seattle, I mean, all over the country, right? And they're quick to that because they don't think there are any long-term consequences. It's like a temper tantrum for them.
There haven't been any.
Well, there haven't been, unfortunately, because
At least not on the individual level.
well, now those same litigators that are saying that there shouldn't be any consequences for that particular type of domestic terrorism are running for office, right? So,
Okay.
I mean, Jeff and I were talking about the other day. I think we're screwed. Either which way this election goes in 2024, we're screwed, right? I think the global elite have something locked and loaded in case Trump gets into office. And I think that'll probably be something very similar to COVID, where they institute worldwide lockdowns and they just deal with the economic consequences because it doesn't really affect the global elite. And then if the right wins, I see American cities, especially these very, very blue metropolises, falling apart, you know, defunding the police on a local level, inciting riots again. And I don't think that the base voter on the right side of the aisle is willing to take those kind of temper tantrums anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So there's gonna be that clash.
There's most definitely that. People are fed up and tired of this shit. And it goes, like, yeah, I remember the conversation that we had about that the other day, because either way, doesn't matter who wins, there's gonna be some type of unrest. Does not matter. And that's for both sides, left and right.
Mm-hmm.
There's people on the far right where a lot of times I'm like, I don't agree with some of that shit. But it's going to happen because people are sick and tired of the bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's been many, many years. I'm not just talking about what's happened in the past 8 years, but it's been going on even farther past that. Like it's that whole indoctrination and conditioning pushing, you know, the citizens or the American people or even people worldwide, kind of manipulating them to do their biddings, right? So, but people are not naturally, and this is just my own opinion, my belief is that naturally we don't like to be pushed, right? If you don't agree with something, or if you don't like something, you don't like someone, you're gonna have something to say about it, and then that kind of revolves into the bullshit, right? Because you're acting off of emotion a lot of the times, not logically thinking about things and actually playing out what are the actual consequences of my actions.
Well, that takes personal responsibility again. I mean,
Right.
it's crazy to me that Jocko Willink made it big just talking about claiming ultimate responsibility for your actions, right? And it was just like, it was so prophetic to this generation of men. And we were just like, we forgot about that, you know? Where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, my dad was born in 47, right? So he's pushing 75 years old. So I grew up with kind of that old school mentality that it doesn't really matter what happens to you. It is your responsibility and how you respond to it, if nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just crazy to me that there's been a lapse, like since the late 80s into the 90s, early 2000s, and then we see 2010 is just like this crazy blow up of social media and all this other randomized agenda to just disenfranchise like the American household. And it comes down to just that, man, that like it's your responsibility. If you want to be a firearms owner, it shouldn't be the government telling you qualify to be a firearms owner. Are you responsible enough to keep it in a safe location and employ it only as a need be when lethal force is authorized? I mean, if you want to be a voter, I think you have the obligation and the responsibility to go out and become at least somewhat educated on a superficial level on the facts, you know, not just the headlines. And unfortunately, I don't know how. It's like we don't want to take personal responsibility, but I want to condemn you for not taking personal responsibility as well, right? So it's like it's a pretty crazy social dilemma we find ourselves in. I don't have the ultimate solution for it, which is And when a deep thinker can't find a solution for a particular problem, unfortunately, what that leads to is physical conflict. You know what I mean? When the thinkers can't find a solution and the talkers aren't willing to talk about a solution, what's next? I mean, that's a clash of morals, and that's societal unrest. It's kind of a downer topic, though. I guess we can switch topics. I mean, the revolution's coming, though. Just know which side you're on.
I would be in
Amen,
favor.
brother.
I would be in favor of some type of legislation mandating some sort of a test on the subjects of a vote. Before you go and vote for a president, both parties can come down on, like 10 questions about themselves or the other candidate. And you go through, and if you can't get like 70% of this stuff right, like you have no idea who you're voting for or why.
That's kind of what you were saying, like
Voting in ignorance helps no one.
right. The whole. It's even in when you go and purchase a firearm, you have to answer a couple questions. Like it should be like, is
I
that
did
what
it
you're
this
talking about?
morning.
Like the same thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
You have to you have to be
that-
qualified, right?
that's asking more of like the legal question. Are you an illegal alien?
Well, yeah, but
No. Are you under indictment of a court? Are you a felon? No. But ask something. We see these things all the time on, YouTube videos or whatever. The guy out on the street brings the mic up to somebody and says, "Would you be in favor of X, Y, Z?" That person's like, "Oh yes, I'm all for it." So you endorse Donald Trump? No, I don't like Donald Trump at all. Well, these are all of his policies.
yeah,
What?
they had no idea,
Yeah.
zero fucking idea of.
Well, that person doesn't need to vote. They have no idea what they're doing.
Well, all right, two big issues with that. One, I believe in laissez-faire, right? Keep your hands off as little government as absolutely fucking possible. As far as I'm concerned, the government's job should be to uphold contracts, create a military for homeland defense, and potentially, if we could wrap our brains around it, provide free healthcare. Outside of those three things, I don't know that the government should be involved in my day-to-day operations. So I think we as a society should be able to piece it all together at a local level. So big issue number one, they don't even require IDs to be able to vote right now.
No.
And we can't even get that passed through the House of Representatives. Oh, it did pass the House, it won't pass the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Which is absolutely ridiculous. And number two, politicians don't necessarily lead with their intentions, right? They lead with what the big donors want them to say, right? What do my big donors want me to say? What are my constituents going to believe, right? And what are the emotional hot button topics to get people angry at each other? So that's what a presidential debate is supposed to be. You sit down and you discuss the topics, but what does it come down to far too often is it's a bickering back and forth. You're an idiot, this is why you're an asshole, this is why and it's just like there's no policy to be discussed.
Donald Trump coming out with some great sound bites. Only Rosie O'Donnell.
As far as Donald Trump is concerned, man, let's talk about Donald Trump, okay? I think Jordan Peterson had it spot on when he said Donald Trump is a very sophisticated 13-year-old bully. Okay? And he is, man. Like I've said for years, I don't think I'd ever invite Donald Trump to my home to have a beer with me. I don't think I'd enjoy that conversation at all. But when it comes to who I want running our country, he's the type of guy I want running our country.
Yeah.
Because you have to take the emotion out of the equation.
Well, he does get emotional, I think.
And that's where
But he gets emotional for America. Like you have to be careful with this word pride nowadays, but it is a sense of nationalistic pride, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's like a necessity. And I really believe that he thinks he is the solution for recorrecting the course that America's on right now, right? I don't think he's bought and paid for, which is huge, right? I mean, obviously he's got his donors and his relationships, but just the way he was handling China during his administration, man, he just stood up and said, basically, F you, right? And then what happened to COVID virus? Okay, well, that could be cause and effect. We could argue that. I still think COVID was an act of war, but a guy like Donald Trump, like I said, you want that guy in there who's gonna. You're not gonna make all the right choices.
All those talks of he's gonna bring us into World War III. He brought us out of Afghanistan. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for peace negotiations he orchestrated in the Middle East. We had nothing going on with Russia at the time.
Oh, there's definitely a drawdown on just conflicts worldwide.
And then he told our European allies, like, hey, why are we buying all of your energy from Russia?
Right.
Like, they're an enemy. You're completely dependent on them, and they scoffed at him.
Mm-hmm.
What, months after he left office? I don't even know if it was months, but he left office, and Russia comes into Ukraine. They cut off their supply line to Europe, and they're in chaos. The guy was right.
What's the first thing that, when they changed office, they just immediately shut down that fucking pipeline?
Oh yeah, the Keystone. Mm-hmm.
Like
Day
that,
one.
day one, literally.
Well, it doesn't fit the donor's agenda.
But that's what I'm saying, and that's what he was kind of like. I don't really know where I was going with that, but like the whole, so it kind of ties in with what we have just what y'all just explained, because when you look at a country is a fucking business.
Yeah,
It's a business.
for sure. That's why it's the executive, right? The executive office. You need a CEO. That's the bottom line. And Donald Trump is an aggressive, volatile, no nonsense CEO.
Yeah.
And his job, as far as I'm concerned, is to fill his cabinet with as much wisdom as possible, take as much sound advice as he can in, and make a decision. Whether that is the right decision or the wrong decision, only history will know. But somebody needs to make a decision based on the recommendations of subject matter experts, not based on the recommendations of their donor base.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two very different things. I love the prospect of Elon Musk getting in the Trump administration and being a cabinet member. Like, are you kidding? Those 87,000 IRS agents?
Oh.
Sorry guys, you had a job for 3 years. You don't need more of a job. Like, I can only imagine how much we can cut off of the bottom line with a guy like Elon Musk coming in and saying, like, dude, you can get rid of 85% of these workers right here.
Gonna have to adjust the Constitution. That way Xavier Milei, whenever he's done in Argentina, we can elect him over here.
I don't even know what the fuck that is.
No?
No.
Oh man, so Argentina, just a whole nother, South American country story of inflation rates going through the roof, economy collapsing. Argentina at one point was one of the richest countries in the world. Like
Natural resources and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, back in like the early 1900s.
Or the influx of
But
people running from World War II.
then they get their socialist revolution going, and the government blows up, inflation skyrockets, jobs plummet, people are running out of money, and they change their currency rate, or their currency like 5 times, desperately trying anything, to keep people going. And so this Xavier guy, he ran for office. Well, this dude's even more of a Donald Trump. He came into office and he was like, we're gonna cut, whatever he said, like 50% of the government out. Every single unnecessary government agency, I'm going to abolish it. There's like a whole government administration on LGBT, affairs or something like that. Day one, he axed that whole line. All those people are out. Their economy is on the upturn. The inflation's going down, jobs are being created, people are doing
And
better.
it's not only just that specific agency, and I didn't realize how many different fucking government agencies there were until I got into the field of government
Government
work.
security.
I was like, they really have an agency for this? Like, what was? I'm trying to think of this one where.
There's one office that I work in. They have a book in their lobby. It's just a picture book of all of the patches of different government law enforcement agencies. Just the law enforcement agencies. This book, about the size of this box here, inch thick, page after page after page. Each page has like 20 different patches. All these different law enforcements, just on and on. Why do you need all this?
And when's the last time law enforcement actually stopped a crime?
It's ridiculous. You could, bare minimum, you could consolidate some of this stuff. At least that would, once you consolidate it, that can at least get rid of some of the administrative jobs.
Yeah. Imagine, and the other thing too is some of the people that are in these agencies are getting paid astronomical fucking salaries for what?
Their
To
salaries,
sit at a fucking desk
their
and
benefits, their pensions after the fact. And that's something you always got to remember about government jobs too. A government position, even law enforcement, okay? You love the police all you want. They provide nothing for your economy. They don't produce anything. You actually need the manufacturers. Those are the ones that produce things that boost your actual economy.
would it be fair to say though that war does too?
To an extent. Because,
It's a fucked up thing.
I mean, yeah, but that's, you got Lockheed Martin pumping out how many airframes, parts for those airframes. So.
Whole military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm. And then all that stuff largely gets funded off of, because it's the government that buys most of it, but then at some point, depending on what they're producing, they get to export it overseas. So every time Israel or whatever other nation wants to buy an F-15,
They're doing it in Ukraine. What did they just buy a bunch of freaking
no,
tanks?
we gave them our F-16s. Older airframes. So, America, we prop up our military industrial complex a lot, but sometimes it pays out when we can export it. The F-22, no, we didn't export that one at all. I'm sure that's not even the only one, just the one that people would know about. At least in regards to that, though, you could argue your military industrial complex is a bit of a self-investment, like roads. Yeah, the government is the one who's going to pay for it, and they're paying that with tax dollars they take from everybody else. But the road gets used to help with other things. People getting to their jobs to raise your economy.
Right.
Your other services. And the military, you need that to actually protect yourself.
Yeah.
So, and whatever interests you have abroad.
Well, like just overall, even with some of the agencies that we have or jobs or whatever situations or conflicts, it doesn't matter what it is, even if we need it or we don't need it. Either way, I think we can all say that it all provides something for someone, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't fucking matter. But there's just no common sense with it. And then every time you take something away, you're also taking away from someone, like even an individual or family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get past that? Because everybody's trying to provide new jobs. That's like the biggest thing, the biggest topics of every election too.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we create more jobs? This and that. And I think that was probably a cause of all the dumb shit that they implemented, like government jobs or agencies or organizations.
Government jobs are easy to manufacture.
Right.
They don't really have to do too much, but you get to say that your unemployment rate is down. You created this many jobs.
Right.
That many jobs of people doing absolutely nothing. But that's what was going on with, like I said, with Argentina though. It's creating ridiculous government jobs that serve no purpose.
It's fucking exhausting.
Yeah,
I think a lot of it too is there's so much government regulation, and a lot of the big corporations, every now and then you might hear them talk about, oh, Google endorses whatever legislation that will regulate Google. Why would Google want to pass laws that regulate them? That seems counterintuitive, because it's going to make it that much harder for any competition to step in. Google is already such a massive corporation. Any law that gets passed, they can afford to pay for fines, they can afford the lawyers to work around it, or they can afford whatever extra internal infrastructure changes they need to make to be compliant with it. It makes it that much harder for a competitor